What if I told you that some of the most powerful food plants you could grow in your backyard were never meant to be replanted every year? While most people are clearing beds, buying seeds again, and starting from scratch every spring, there are plants that, if you plant them once, you may never need to replant again for decades. Not next year, not 5 years from now. Decades. Plants that could keep feeding you, feeding your family, and in some cases, still be producing when your grandchildren are old enough to harvest from them. So here's the real question. Why did they hide it? Why were you taught that vegetables must die every season? Why does the system keep pushing you toward annual crops that need replacing over and over again? And what are you missing out on by not planting the ones that come back stronger every year without asking you to start over? Because once you understand this, you stop thinking season by season and start thinking generation by generation. You start realizing how much money you've been spending on crops that were never designed to last. This isn't about rare, exotic plants. It's about food you already recognize. Plants that simply don't fit into the annual replanting cycle. They establish deep roots. They survive tough weather. They return on their own. And if you plant them once, they can quietly feed you for years, while others keep repeating the same yearly routine. Today, I'm going to show you 6 of these plants. Some will produce for 10 years, some for 20. But the real question is this: will you keep planting for one season at a time, or will you start planting for the next generation? If you're serious about building a garden that feeds you long-term instead of draining your wallet every spring, make sure you're subscribed because we focus on food that lasts. Now let's talk about the plants that change everything. The first plant is moringa. Let me ask you something. If you could plant one tree this year and it kept feeding you for the next 10 years, would you make space for it? That's what moringa does. You plant it once and it keeps producing leaves over and over again. You don't replant it every spring. You don't baby it. Once it's established, it works for you. The leaves are edible, soft when young, and packed with nutrients. In many parts of the world, people rely on this plant when food is scarce. Not because it's trendy, because it works. It grows fast. It handles heat. It survives drought better than most leafy vegetables you've tried. When your lettuce bolts and your spinach gives up, moringa keeps pushing out new growth. Now here's the part most people don't realize. You control how productive it becomes. When it grows to about 3 or 4 feet, you cut it back. Hard. It feels wrong the first time. But that cut tells the plant to branch out. More branches mean more leaves. More leaves mean more food for you. If you keep harvesting the young shoots, it keeps responding with new ones. It becomes a cycle. You harvest, it grows, you harvest again. That's how you turn one tree into a steady source of greens. So why isn't everyone growing it? Simple. It doesn't fit big agriculture. The leaves don't last long on grocery shelves. They wilt fast. You can't ship them across the country easily, so supermarkets ignore it. But in your backyard, that doesn't matter. You walk outside, you harvest fresh, you use it the same day. That's where it shines. Plant it in full sun. Make sure the soil drains well. Don't drown it with water. Let the roots go deep. After that, it mostly takes care of itself. If you're serious about growing food that feeds you year after year instead of draining your wallet every season, this is one of the smartest plants you can grow. Not because someone called it a miracle, but because once you grow it, you see how dependable it really is. The second plant is perennial spinach. Let's talk about something most gardeners get frustrated with. Regular spinach. You plant it, it grows nicely, then the heat shows up, and suddenly it bolts, it turns bitter. It's done. Now you're back to replanting again. That cycle gets old. Perennial spinach changes that completely. You plant it once, and instead of giving you one short season, it keeps coming back year after year. You don't start over every spring. It wakes up on its own. That alone saves you time, seeds, and effort. This plant behaves differently. It's steady. It doesn't panic when temperatures shift slightly. It tolerates partial shade. It handles moderate heat better than traditional spinach. And the more you harvest the outer leaves, the more it keeps producing from the center. You don't pull the whole plant. You just keep taking what you need. Think about that for a moment. You walk outside. You cut a handful of fresh leaves for your meal. You leave the crown intact. A week later, you come back and there's more waiting for you. That's how it feeds you long term. Nutritionally, it still gives you what you expect from leafy greens: iron, fiber, magnesium. It's not flashy, it's not marketed as a superfood, but it's consistent, and consistency is what keeps your kitchen supplied. So why don't more people grow it? Because garden centers focus on annual seed packets. Annual crops mean repeat sales every year. Perennial greens don't create that cycle. Once you have it, you have it. It quietly keeps doing its job without needing constant replacement. To grow it, give it well-drained soil and mix in compost before planting. It doesn't need perfect conditions. Just don't let it sit in soggy ground. Space it well so air can move around it. When it starts producing, harvest the outer leaves regularly. Don't strip it bare. Treat it like a living supply, not a one-time harvest. If a flower stalk tries to form, pinch it off early. That keeps the plant focused on leaf production instead of seed. In my experience, this plant becomes the backup plan in the garden. When other greens struggle, it's still there. When you forget to reseed something, it's still there. When grocery prices climb and you want fresh greens without another purchase, it's still there. You plant it once and it earns its place. Not because it's dramatic, but because it's dependable. The third plant is tree collards. Now let's talk about a plant that completely changes the way you think about leafy greens. Tree collards are not like the kale you plant every spring and pull out at the end of the season. This one grows upward like a small tree. You plant it once, and instead of starting over every year, it keeps producing leaves for you season after season. No constant reseeding. No buying new transplants, just steady growth. Once it's established, it becomes part of your garden structure. You walk outside, snap off a few leaves for your meal, and the plant stays right there, ready to keep feeding you. The leaves taste very similar to kale. You can cook them the same way. Steam them, stir-fry them, blend them into smoothies, add them to soups. But here's where it gets practical. Think about how often you buy leafy greens from the store. Every week. Sometimes twice a week. That adds up over a year. Now imagine cutting that expense because one plant keeps producing for you. That's real savings. That's food security you can see growing in front of you. And because tree collards grow vertically, they give you more harvest without taking up more ground space. One plant can feed you again and again if you harvest it properly. So why don't you see them everywhere? Because they're usually grown from cuttings, not seed packets. They don't fit the annual seed cycle that garden centers rely on, and they don't grow in neat, machine-harvested rows for commercial farms. But in a home garden, that's not a problem. That's an advantage. To grow them, choose a sunny spot with good drainage. Mix compost into the soil before planting. When the plant is young, give it support if needed. Once it thickens and matures, it becomes sturdy. Harvest the lower leaves first and leave the top growing point intact. That keeps it producing upward. Don't strip it bare. Just take what you need. Come back in a week. There will be more. That's how you turn one planting into years of harvest. Now let me ask you something simple. If you knew this one plant could keep feeding you leafy greens for years and save you money every season, would you plant tree collards in your garden? Let me know in the comments. The next one is a plant that most people have never heard of, but once you understand it, you start wondering why it isn't in more gardens. Chaya, often called Mexican tree spinach, is not your typical leafy green. This plant grows as a shrub. You plant it once, and instead of dying back after a season like regular spinach, it keeps producing year after year in warm climates. When your lettuce struggles in the heat and your spinach bolts and turns bitter, Chaya keeps growing. It doesn't complain about hot weather. It doesn't need constant replanting. It simply continues producing leaves. That alone makes it valuable. But here's what makes it even more practical. The yield from one mature plant is impressive. You can harvest leaves regularly, cook them, and the plant responds by sending out more growth. You're not dealing with a delicate crop. You're working with a tough, dependable producer. Now let me be clear about one important thing. Chaya leaves must be cooked before eating. That's not optional. Cooking removes the natural compounds that shouldn't be consumed raw. But once cooked, the leaves become a rich, nutritious green you can add to soups, stews, stir-fries, or mix with eggs and grains. In many parts of Central America, families have relied on this plant for generations. It wasn't grown for decoration. It was grown because it fed people consistently. So why isn't it mainstream? Because it doesn't fit into commercial vegetable farming. It doesn't ship easily. It doesn't sit neatly in grocery store packaging. And because it requires simple preparation knowledge, big food systems avoid it. But in your backyard, that's not a problem. You harvest, you cook, you eat. That's it. To grow chaya, choose a sunny location. It loves warmth. Make sure the soil drains well. It's drought-tolerant once established, which means less watering for you. It's usually grown from cuttings, not seeds, so once you have one plant, you can easily multiply it. Prune it regularly to encourage new leaf growth and to keep it at a manageable height. The more you harvest, the more it produces. Think about what that means for you. A steady supply of cooked greens from one plant, season after season, without reseeding every year. That's real food security. That's long-term thinking. Now I want to ask you directly. If you live in a warm climate and you knew this one shrub could keep feeding you year after year, would you plant chaya in your garden? Let me know in the comments. The fifth plant is one that rewards patience more than almost anything else in your garden: asparagus. Asparagus is not fast food. It's long-term food. You plant it once, and if you treat it right, it can feed you for 15 to 20 years. That's not an exaggeration. 2 decades from one planting. Now here's the part most people don't like hearing. The first year, you don't harvest. The second year, you barely harvest. It takes about 2 to 3 years before you start cutting spears properly. But once it starts producing, every spring you'll see those fresh green spears pushing out of the soil like clockwork. And the taste? Fresh asparagus from your garden is completely different from what you buy in stores. It's sweeter, tender, not woody. When you cut it in the morning and cook it the same day, you'll understand why people dedicate permanent beds just for it. You can steam it, grill it, roast it with a little oil and salt, or chop it into eggs. It becomes one of the first vegetables you eat each spring. That timing matters. When nothing else is ready, asparagus shows up. Now think about the money side. Asparagus is not cheap in stores, especially when it's out of peak season. Imagine harvesting bundle after bundle every spring without paying for it. Over 10 years, that adds up. And if you ever grow more than you need, it's a crop people happily buy fresh because the flavor difference is obvious. So why don't more people grow it? Because it requires patience. It doesn't give instant results. Modern gardening culture often wants fast harvests. Asparagus teaches you to think long-term. To grow it, plant 1-year-old crowns in a sunny spot with well-drained soil. Dig a trench, lay the crowns out, cover them gradually as they grow. Keep weeds under control. Once established, it becomes low maintenance. Every year, it comes back stronger. Now let me ask you something serious. If you could dedicate one small part of your garden to a plant that would feed you every spring for the next 15 to 20 years, would you be willing to make that commitment? Tell me in the comments. Would you set aside space for asparagus in your garden? The last one we have is one of the most fascinating plants you can grow in a food garden: Egyptian walking onion. Egyptian walking onions are not your normal onions. You don't plant them every year from seed. You don't keep buying sets every season. You plant them once, and they keep multiplying on their own. Here's what makes them different. Instead of just forming bulbs underground, they grow small bulbs at the top of their stalks. When those top bulbs get heavy, the stalk bends over and the bulbs touch the soil. Then they root themselves. That's why they're called walking onions. They slowly move across your garden bed year after year without you doing the replanting. Now think about what that means for you. Fresh onion flavor anytime you need it. You can snip the green tops like chives. You can pull the underground bulbs, you can harvest the top sets. One planting turns into a patch. That patch turns into a steady supply. And onions are something you use constantly. Soups, sauces, stews, stir-fries, eggs. Almost every savory dish starts with onion. So instead of buying bags over and over again, you step outside and harvest what you need. That saves money quietly, week after week. How long does it take to harvest? Not long. Within the first growing season, you can start cutting green tops. By the next season, you'll have more bulbs multiplying. After that, it becomes almost self-managing. They're cold-hardy, tough, and not picky about soil as long as it drains well. So why aren't they more popular? Because they don't fit commercial systems. They don't form those perfectly uniform supermarket bulbs. They don't need annual seed sales. They simply keep going once you have them. And that's exactly why they belong in a home garden. Now let me ask you something. If you could plant onions once and let them keep feeding you year after year without starting over, would you give a small section of your garden to Egyptian walking onions? Tell me in the comments, would you plant them? So there you have it, 6 powerful plants that completely change the way you think about gardening. Instead of replanting every single year, instead of spending money on seeds and seedlings season after season, you plant once and harvest for years. Some of these will feed you for a decade, some for 2. This is how you build a garden that supports you long-term, not a garden that drains your time, your energy, and your wallet every spring. This is how you shift from seasonal growing to permanent food production. Now here's my challenge to you. Don't try to plant all 6 at once. Pick one. Just one. Dedicate a small part of your garden to something that will still be feeding you years from now. Watch what happens when that plant establishes itself. Watch how it changes the way you plan your space. Watch how it reduces your grocery trips little by little. That's how you move from short-term harvests to long-term security. If this opens your eyes to a smarter way of growing food, share this with someone who's tired of starting over every season. And if you're serious about building a garden that feeds you year after year, make sure you're subscribed because we're just getting started. Now I want to hear from you. Out of these 6, which one are you planting first? Drop it in the comments. Let's build gardens that work for us, not the other way around. I'll see you in the next one.